Hello and welcome to a new episode of Adobe Creative Cloud TV. My name is Terry White, and in this episode we're going to take a look at how to get started with Adobe Photoshop Lightroom 5. The 10 things beginners want to know how to do. So if you're brand new to Lightroom, if you got Lightroom as part of Creative Cloud or you got it standalone, doesn't matter, same Lightroom. Now you're going to get to learn not only how to get started, but the 10 things people ask me the most. So let's jump right in. First thing is, I have Lightroom 5 open, and I have it set to open with basically I have a brand new catalog. This Lightroom Getting Started catalog I just created right before this video. It has no pictures in it. It's basically starting where you would be starting if you just launched Lightroom for the first time. Now, speaking of which, let's get a little terminology out of the way right off the bat. What's a catalog? Well, think of the catalog as your library of photos. The easiest analogy I can make is if you think of iTunes. You have an iTunes library for all your music, all your media, all your movies. And then you have these things called playlists that organize your certain songs in the order you want to listen to, just the ones you want. So if you think of the catalog in Lightroom as your library in iTunes for music, but this would be for photos, of course, and then you think of this area over here that we're going to come to called collections as the actual playlist. Now, just like iTunes, your music is somewhere on your hard drive, probably in an iTunes music folder, and your pictures in Lightroom are on your hard drive in a folder or in multiple folders. So nothing is actually being stored inside of Lightroom or inside that catalog itself, except for metadata, which is the information about the photos, the keywords, the developed settings that you do, and all the things you do to the photos. That is stored in the catalog, but the actual photos themselves are in the folders, wherever you put them, on whatever drive you put them on. So, speaking of which, number one, importing your photos. How do I get my images to be recognized by Lightroom? Well, that's either going to happen one of two ways. Either A, you're going to take a memory card out of your camera, like I've got this SD memory card here from my Nikon D600, and I'm going to pop it into my computer, and then it will show up in Lightroom. Or B, you've already copied the images to your hard drive, and you just want Lightroom to see them. We're going to do both. So let's first start with the memory card. I'm going to pop the memory card in my computer, and after a couple of seconds, since Lightroom is already open, it'll pop up just like it just did and said, hey, you put in a memory card. I'm going to let you bring in images from that memory card. So I'm going to go ahead, and there's 202 photos on this memory card. I do not want all of these photos, so I'm going to uncheck the all photos. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and I can go ahead and make my thumbnail smaller so I can decide, see more images at a glance to maybe decide which ones I want to bring in. I'm going to scroll up a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and start grabbing some of these images. So I want, let's say, from here to here. So I'm just holding now. I clicked on the first one, held down my shift key, and clicked on the last one. Now I'm going to enable the checkbox for one of those images since they're all selected. All of them are now checked. So I'm saying bring in all of those images so far, and I can keep adding more to it. So I can say, hey, a few of these I want as well. So for example, I can take a couple of these that are upside down for some reason, and I can go ahead and bring those in and check those as well. So I can go through this whole card, picking and choosing which images I want to bring in if I don't want to bring them all in. And now that I've got it decided which ones I'm going to bring in, the next big question is how and where. So on the left-hand side, this goes from left to right. On the left-hand side, it's saying, hey, I'm going to bring these in from your Nikon D600 memory card. That's what it's called. And I'm going to eject that card after it's imported. Now the middle section is you've decided which photos you want to bring in, and now you're going to tell it either copy them or copy them as DNG. So let me explain the difference. Copy is the most common one you'll use, and it is the one you'll use if you're shooting in JPEG. There is no other choice. You're just going to copy the photos because you don't want to reference them on the card because that card is eventually going to get erased. So you want to copy them to your hard drive in a specific folder. The next one, which is the one that I like to use the most when I'm shooting in RAW, is copy as DNG. Now let's say you got RAW and JPEG on that card. Still use the copy as DNG because that will only apply to the RAW files and the JPEGs will still get copied as normal. But what is this DNG thing? What will that do? It's going to do one extra step. It's going to take my proprietary RAW, Nikon, Canon, Olympus, Fuji, whatever they are, and it's going to convert them into a non-proprietary format called digital negative, or DNG for short. I always convert my RAW files into DNG, and I've been doing it for years. There are many advantages, one of which being they're not proprietary. Number two, they're usually a little bit smaller than the RAW files. You don't lose any quality. And they're also, you don't have this whole sidecar file thing going on when you make adjustments. So if that confuses you, just know copy as DNG is a good thing. If it scares you, just copy. Either way will work. Now, last but not least, on the right-hand side here, we're going to tell it, most importantly, where to put them. In other words, after it's copied them from the card, converted them to DNG, where will those DNGs be? So I'm going to scroll down a little bit and go to destination. This is the most important part here. So now, right now, if I don't do anything, it's going to put them in my pictures folder, loose in my pictures folder, and I don't want that to happen. I do want them into a subfolder, and normally Lightroom will default that subfolder by date. And I personally do not like that. I do not like my images organized by date because that doesn't mean anything to me. I want my images organized by event. And event would mean I'm going to say not by date, but into one folder, and I'm going to call that folder whatever I want. So in this case, these would be my photos of Amanda. And it could be my family reunion. It could be my soccer game. It could be whatever, but I'm naming that event and putting them all into that one subfolder in the pictures folder on my main hard drive. You can put them anywhere you want. So your photos are your photos. You store them wherever it's most convenient for you. If you want to store them on an external hard drive, you want to store them on a NAS, a file server, wherever, your photos can be wherever you want. But the catalog itself should not be on a network drive. It should be on one of your local hard drives. But the photos can be anywhere. And again, you want to put them somewhere safe. Now let's scroll back up. Couple more options here. Secondly, I'm going to enable a new Lightroom 5 feature called Build Smart Previews. And what that will do is it will, of course, build a preview that we can see in Lightroom, but it's going to build a higher resolution preview that isn't as high as the original file size, but will allow me to do everything I could potentially do in Lightroom if I, for some reason, didn't have the files with me. So for example, let's say I import these onto a second hard drive, and then I take my laptop off somewhere, and I didn't bring the second hard drive. Well, because I built those smart previews, I'd still be able to work on these images. I'd be able to apply keywords and metadata and adjustments. I'd be able to work on them in the develop module. I'd be able to output small, low-resolution versions of them. So smart previews is the next best thing to having the original photos with you. So smart previews, new Lightroom 5 feature, definitely going to use that. And then last but not least, this is an option I don't use personally, but it is one that you need to know about, and that is make a second copy to, meaning this is your one-shot. Lightroom will do a backup for you of those images to another folder, maybe on another drive. So if you're out in the field, you're on vacation, you're somewhere where you're not in your normal backup environment in your studio or in your home or in your office, then you might want to go ahead and make that second copy to another drive just so you'll have the backup. And basically all you would do is just enable this box and tell it where to put the backup, what drive to put it on, what folder to put it on, and it's just a one-time shot upon import. Now, once you've decided where they're coming from, which ones, how to copy them, and more importantly, where to put them, you have the option, and of course, how to build your smart previews and to make a backup. You have the option of putting in some keywords. So if you want to just go ahead and say, hey, these are all of Amanda. and this is Michigan, and this is in the studio. I could put any kind of keywords like that apply to all the photos. And last but not least, I have a metadata template set up. Again, because I've used Lightroom before, but this would be none in your case. And I can go in and I can say either create a new one or edit an existing one. So if I say create a new one, it basically lets me go in and put in all the information inside my photos about me or about the photos themselves. So I can say copyright Terry White, creator Terry White, city Troy, Michigan, so forth and so on. I can put my website in. All that information will be stored inside the photos themselves or in the metadata of the photos so that whenever I output them, export them, put them online, whatever, anyone that goes to look at that information, it would be there. And it's just one of those things you can do upon import that saves you the time so you don't have to think about doing it later. All right, so I've already got one set up. I'm just going to go ahead and choose it. And now that I've got it set up, I'm going to go ahead and do the import. So now it's importing those files. And it took me out of the import dialog box, and now it's in the Lightroom catalog. Now you'll notice a couple of things. It's going to take a little bit longer than a regular copy because it's doing the conversion to DNG on the fly. And you'll notice that under folders, the hard drive is now here. The hard disk and a folder called Amanda where those actual images are being stored. So that's the drive that they're on, and whatever the name of your drive is, that's what would appear here. And so it's just going ahead and doing its thing, doing the copy and doing the conversion to digital negative as well. Now, once that's done, you'll see a second progress bar that will go through as it's doing the smart previews. That one you do not have to wait for. It will build those in the background. And it builds those pretty quickly, so you don't have to usually wait. Now, you'll also notice in this case, this little video icon, Lightroom can bring in both your still images and any videos that you shot in the process of your creativity or your shoot. So it brought in that video, and that clip will be there. All right, and it just gave me a warning, hey, non-RAW files were not converted to DNG. Specifically, it's referring to the video, and I'm okay with that because it can't convert a video to DNG. And then it ejected the card, and away we go. So that was number one, importing your images. Number two, getting rid of your rejects, getting rid of the ones you don't want now that you've brought in the ones from your card. So I'm here with my images, and now I want to go through my selection process. So to do that, thumbnail's not big enough. I need to see them larger. And I see in this case, I've got 6 photos in a row that look exactly the same. So I probably only need one of those, maybe 2 of those. I don't need all of them. And I'm pretty sure I shot these during a demonstration, so they are probably all identical, shot from a tripod, maybe with different focus points. But let's go ahead and take a closer look. So I need to see them larger. I hit the letter E on my keyboard. E is an echo to bring them up into loop mode. Once I bring it up into loop mode, I can then go through my selection process by just using my left and right arrow keys. So I can arrow over to the next photo, and guess what? It didn't change. It changed the number, 8007 versus 8006, because they're identical. So no visual change. So guess what? I have 6, 7 looks just like it. I don't need 7. So I'm going to hit the letter X on my keyboard to set it as a reject, because I don't need it. I don't need 2 or 3 or 4 of the exact same photo. Number 8 looks a little darker, but again, I already have it. I'm going to hit the X. Number 9, same thing, X. Number 10, X. Like I said, these were shot on the tripod sequentially, so they're pretty much going to be identical. Now, the only difference here is the focus point is now, instead of on the top bud, it's on the bottom right-hand bud. And that one I'll keep because that one is different than the first one, which is number 6. So I won't mark that as a reject. I'll just keep going. Now we get to the video. Well, that's a video, so I only have the one. I'm not going to reject that. And then we have this one with Amanda with her eyes closed. Don't need that one. Never going to use it. So I hit the letter X. And then we have this one where she's smiling. Good shot. We'll keep that one. And then she's holding a white balance card, which we'll get into in a moment. We definitely need that one. And these are the ones that we would white balance or correct afterwards. And they're all slightly different, so we'll keep all of those. We might narrow it down to our favorite after the fact, but we'll keep those for now. All right, so now I've gone through the 15 photos or 15 things I brought in, because one of them is a video. And now I want to eliminate the ones that I said I don't need, the ones I marked as X. So I'm going to hit the letter G to go back to the grid view so that we can see what I did. And you can see the little reject flags. That's every time I hit the letter X. And it kind of dims out the photos, letting you know which ones you're going to reject. And then the ones that aren't rejected look fine. So now I want to tell Lightroom, get rid of those ones I don't need. So this is a keyboard shortcut. On the Mac, it would be Command Delete. On PC, Control Backspace would say delete whichever number of photos you rejected from your disk or just remove them from Lightroom. Now, this is where we separate as the saying goes, the men from the boys or the women from the girls. This is where we decide, as a photographer, those images that I rejected them for a reason. It means I'm never going to use them. I don't need 5 copies of that same photo with a flower. I don't need a copy of Amanda with her eyes closed. I'm going to now delete them from my hard drive. So instead of remove from Lightroom, which is the wimpy way to do it, we're going to say delete from disk. That will move them to your system trash or recycle bin, whatever operating system you're on, but they're now out of Lightroom. They're now out of that folder. They're gone. And well, once you empty your trash, they're gone. Okay, so now I'm left with my potential picks or my potential favorites. So that was number 2. Getting rid of your rejects, getting rid of the ones that you don't want. Now, number 3. Number 3 is making collections. In other words, putting our favorites together. So I'm going to say that I like both of these flowers because they're kind of, both the same. I mean, both same flower, but different focus points. I like the video, which I can scrub through it just by hovering over it. Great, we're going to keep the video. We're going to keep this first picture of Amanda. And we're probably going to keep the one where she's smiling here and maybe here at the end. So those are the ones that are my favorites. And I want to put them in a collection. Remember, iTunes, playlist, Lightroom, collection for your photos. So we're going to put them in a collection. And we have the collections area here. I'm just going to click the plus sign with those photos selected and create collection. When I say create collection, it will ask me whatever I want to name these. I'm going to say Amanda Favorites, if I can spell. And now that I have my favorites, notice it automatically checked include the selected photos, meaning, hey, you went through the process of clicking on these, you probably want them in the collection. So yes, I do. Create collection. And now I have 2 things. I have the Amanda photo folder with all 10 things in it. And I have the Amanda Favorites collection with just the 6 things in it that I want, the 6 photos / movie. So that is how collections work. You can, and by the way, you can move them around after the fact. So I can say, hey, there's one more photo I want in that collection. I can drag and drop after the fact and put it in there. If I go to the collection and say, change my mind, I don't really want the one where she's not smiling. Hit my delete key and it's gone from the collection. So I'm never deleting the photo unless I'm actually deleting it from the folder. Collections are like playlists. Rearrange the songs in the order you want. So if I want the smiling picture first, put the smiling picture first. If I want to output them in a certain way, put them in that order. If I want to remove, add, delete, whatever, change, that's what collections are for. The folder contains the actual photos / videos. So that was number 3, making collections. Number 4, using the develop module. All right, so we've got some photos that need some help. First of all, these are all too blue. That's because the white balance was off on the camera based on the light source that was used. So I want to correct these all, and that's why I had her hold this white balance card so I'd be able to collect them. Now Lightroom, as great as it is, Also lets me do this really wonderful thing. It lets me correct more than one photo at a time. So I can start with the first one, hold down my Shift key, click on the last one so that they're all selected. And then I can go to my Develop module just by clicking Develop or hitting the letter D. And the first one will be highlighted, but they're all still selected. Now, if you turn on Auto Sync, that means, when you see Auto Sync displayed down here, that means that if you make changes to one photo, it makes them to all the selected photos. If you don't have Auto Sync turned on, it will only make the change to the first photo, and you'll have to manually sync it to the other ones. So I like Auto Sync turned on. We click our little white balance eyedropper, and we click, and it adjusts the white balance for all the photos. Now, to me, that's a little still too warm. So luckily, with white balance, you can cool it off yourself manually. I can maybe make the flesh tones look a little bit more natural. And I can make my own adjustments to those photos. Let's say that I want to also adjust the exposure. I can pump up the exposure a little bit more on those photos. So I can do any adjustments I want, and it will happen to all of the photos that were selected because I have Auto Sync turned on. So now if I deselect, click on any one photo, those photos have now all been adjusted based on that white balance that I did. Now, if I go back, hit the letter G, I did all of that in the folder. Guess what? Since they're the same images, it did it in the collections too. Because the collection is not a duplicate. It's just referencing a segment or certain set of photos or videos from the main folders. And yes, your collection can have photos from different folders in it, just like your iTunes playlist can have different songs from different albums or different artists. So same concept. All right, so now that we've done a little bit of developing, let's do a little bit more. So for example, let's select this one photo, and we'll hit the letter D to take it over to the Develop module. And the first thing I want to do is crop it. So I'm going to click on the cropping here, and it's locked for the aspect ratio. So I can just go ahead and pull down, and it will go ahead and crop this photo. I can move it around in the crop area and recompose that photo based on the cropping. All right, when I deselect or get off the crop tool, it then shows me the newly cropped photo. Now, here's the beauty of the Develop module, just so that you know. First of all, the Develop module is exactly the same as Adobe Camera Raw. So if you're used to Photoshop and Camera Raw, you have the exact same thing here. It's just dark gray versus light gray. The next thing is the Develop module gives you a preview. So if I were to grab the white balance eyedropper and hover over different spots, it shows me in the preview what I would get if I were to click. And none of these would be good places, so I can go ahead and put it back. But that's the other advantage of doing it here versus in Camera Raw. The next thing is that anything you do in the Develop module is non-destructive. So that means that you can always undo it or change it. So if I didn't like the crop, guess what? I can go right back to the crop tool and uncrop. I can come back tomorrow, the next day, 10 years from now, whenever I want, and uncrop because it didn't really throw anything away. It didn't really change any pixels. It didn't really do anything to the actual photo. It's doing it to the metadata in the Lightroom catalog that references that photo that's on your hard drive. So that is the Develop module. We could spend all day on the Develop module. There's all kinds of adjustments we can do. Luckily, there are sliders so that you can always kind of see what you're going to get just by dragging a slider left or right to kind of see what the change would be. So if I want to enhance the blacks, I kind of like that. And I want to enhance the highlights, maybe make the highlights a little brighter. I can make any adjustments I want. I can even adjust on the histogram itself. So if my shadows were too dark, I can bring the shadows back out. If my overall exposure was too low or too dark, I can adjust the overall exposure. I can also work in the highlights, shadows, blacks and whites. Now, again, we can spend more time on Develop, but that's Develop in a nutshell, quickly making adjustments inside Lightroom. Now, let's say that you need to do something that Lightroom can't do. Like I want to maybe use a filter, I want to liquefy, I want to composite, I want to add text, I want to do things that Lightroom's really not suited for. Lightroom's great for making adjustments and using the adjustment brush and making specific adjustments, but it's not Photoshop. Photoshop does way more for editing. So let's go back to the grid and let's say that I now want to work on this photo in Photoshop, which would be number 5. How do I edit my images inside Photoshop? Well, if I select the image, I can go to my edit menu. I'm sorry. If I select the image, I can right click on it and go to my edit menu. That's what I meant to say. And say edit in Photoshop. I normally do this with a keyboard shortcut, Command E, and that will take a copy of that, or actually, it'll take the original in this case because it's a raw file. It'll take it with your Lightroom adjustments and it will open it in Photoshop. So now I'm in Photoshop CC and I can go in and make any adjustments I want. And this little bulge here in the sweater is kind of bothering me. So this is something Lightroom can't do. I can go to my filter menu. I can come down to liquify. I can go in and just kind of liquefy that shoulder a little bit, push it down, push that bulge down that was bothering me. Now she's got muscles, which is cool, but that was more of a bulge in the sweatshirt itself. And we're just going to go ahead and kind of sort out some of these wrinkles, sort out some of these things that are bothering me in the actual photo. Now, again, we can go in and we can, once we get out of the filter, we can go in and we could do a whole retouch here. We could go in and kind of just start, here, I can go to my spot healing tool. We can kind of remove some moles and pimples and things and maybe kind of adjust a little bit under the eyes here, make this a little bit better. You know, instead of maybe 2 lines under the eyes, we'll leave it with 1. And we can do all kinds of cool adjustments here. But that's what Photoshop does. So now, again, this is not a Photoshop lesson, but just know you go into Photoshop, do the things that Photoshop does best. When you're done, you're going to go ahead and close this photo and save your changes. Now, when you close your photo and save your changes, it's going to, close the photo eventually. And then when you head back over to Lightroom, you're going to have 2 copies. You're going to have the original DNG or JPEG or whatever you start it with. And you're now going to have the PSD or TIFF, depending on how you have your settings in your catalog set to. So basically, it brought back a PSD of the edited version, which I could always go back and re-edit and continue working on. And I'll always have the original. So again, non-destructive, because I can always get back to the original. Now I'm going to delete the original from the collection. And then we're going to take a look at converting photos to DNG, which would be number 6, and Smart Previews, which is also number 6, if you didn't do it upon import. So we're going to do 2 things. First, we're going to import another set of photos, this time that are already on the hard drive, and we're not going to do the conversion. We're going to do it after the fact. So here we go. Click our import button, and it's going to say, hey, where do you want to get your photos from? And I'm going to say, not from the external hard drive. I'm going to say they're in my user folder, in my, on my desktop, and they're in my Seattle folder. So here we go. So now I'm just going to say, go ahead and bring all of those in except this one and this one, which is blurry. I can see it's blurry. That's a duplicate. And I probably like that one better. And I probably don't need that one. But don't build smart previews. Just go ahead and add the photos in. Now notice it says add versus copy or copy as DNG because it says, hey, these are already on his hard drive. He probably just wants to add them in Lightroom. He doesn't need to copy them anymore because they're already on the hard drive. They're not on a memory card. So we're going to go ahead and just import. And that will import much faster because it didn't have to do anything. Just reference them in Lightroom. It didn't have to convert anything, didn't have to do anything. So it brought in the original RAW files, which Lightroom can work with. You don't have to convert to DNG. It will work with your Canon, Nikon, and so forth and so on RAW files. Now that I'm here, let's say I do want to do the conversion. Well, I can go ahead and select these photos and I can convert to DNG by just going to my library menu and say convert to DNG and delete the original NEF files or CR2 files after it's done. So go ahead, and that's where we will get the progress bar as it's converting each one to a DNG and then throwing away the original NEF file. So it's basically replacing what was there, even if you made adjustments to it. All right, next, what if I want to build smart previews? Library, previews, build smart previews. So yes, you can build smart previews. You can convert to DNG after the images are already in Lightroom. You don't have to do it upon import. If you're using tether capture, you can't do it during import anyway. So you will have to do it after the fact, because tether is going to capture them or bring them in from your camera as soon as you take the pictures, which, by the way, that's a bonus of the top 10, even though we covered it last time in Lightroom 4. We're not going to cover it today, but just so you know, you can connect your camera up, if it's supported, via the USB cable and shoot directly into Lightroom using the tether capture feature. So that's a bonus of the 10. We're not going to do it today. All right, so now we've got this folder called Seattle. We've got this folder called Amanda. If I want to take one of the Seattle photos and move it into the Amanda collection, I can. So that means I can mix and match, as I said before. Now the next one, which is number 7, is creating a watermark. So a lot of times when people export their photos out or put them online, they love a visible watermark that says don't copy, or studio logo, or photo by, or whatever you want. Well, Lightroom has a watermarking feature built in. We can go in under the Lightroom menu and we can say edit watermarks. And it will usually come in with your username of your computer, or user account. So this one's called Adobe, so it says copyright Adobe. But I could say, no, copyright Terry White. And that will be a very basic, simple text watermark. But I would prefer to use my actual logo. So if you have a PNG version of your logo or JPEG version of your logo, which you could easily go create in Photoshop, you can say, no, give me a graphic one. And then you can go find that logo and bring it in. And now that's my actual logo that's going to be at the bottom left, right, center of my photos, wherever I want. And you decide the wherever you want by scrolling down, left, right, top right, wherever you want, how much inset you want from the left and from the bottom, and it will proportionally size the logo based on the size of the photo. So kind of always keeping it looking like this no matter what resolution the photo is. So now that I've got this custom watermark, I can save it. It's going to ask me what do I want to call it. Oh, one more thing, cancel. I want to do one more thing, and that is lower the opacity of it. I don't want it to be 100%. How about 70%? So now I can save it, and I can call it TWP, Terry White Photography, stamp 70%. I already had a 70, so we'll make that one 70%. So now that watermark is there for any exporting, saving, printing, anything I want to do from here on out. And we're about to do that next, because number 8 is exporting and sharing. So now let's say we take this PSD, we'll move it into collection, and now we want to export that one out for some reason and maybe email it or give it to someone or put it on Facebook or put it online or do whatever we want to do with it. So that is getting the photo out of Lightroom via the export module. And actually, I kind of like this one better. Let's take a look at it closer. All it kind of needs is a little bit more cropping. Actually, this is a better photo because it's lit better. All right, so forget that one. Let's do this one. All right, so now I'd love to export that one out and maybe put it online or put it somewhere or give it to someone on a drive. So I don't want to give them the original raw file. They wouldn't know what to do with the DNG anyway. And I want to post it online. Can't post DNGs online anyway. So I need a JPEG. File, export. Now I have tons of presets because I've used Lightroom before. Yours are going to be empty, but that's okay because we're going to build one from scratch. So where do I want this to export? Pick a folder, wherever you want on whatever drive you want. So I'm going to leave it on the desktop. Then I'm going to put it in a subfolder called, we'll call this one for client. Or how about for web? Now, after it exports it, do you want to add it back into the catalog? Absolutely not, because I have the original. Do I want to rename it? Nope. It can use whatever name it is. Do I want to include videos? In this case, I'm not selecting any videos, not a problem. What format do I want it in? Yes, I want it in JPEG because that's the most common for the web. What color space do you want? sRGB, Adobe RGB. sRGB is the most common for the web. What quality do you want? This is up to you. Whatever quality you want to do to make your photos look better online or not look as good online, but maybe take up less space. Resize. This is a big one because you've got this huge raw file that's, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 pixels wide by so many pixels tall. And of course, that's probably too big for the web. So I normally, for the web these days, go with 1024 on the longest dimension. So I just type in 1024 by 1024. You can type in whatever you want, 800 by 800, 1200 by 1200, whatever you want. And I say don't enlarge. In other words, if it's smaller than that, leave it smaller. But if it's larger, go ahead and size it down to this at a resolution of whatever you want. 72 pixels per inch, 96 pixels per inch, whatever you want. And then metadata. I usually leave all that metadata in that we talked about before, my copyright, my studio name, my website information, and then the watermark. I want to use that new one we just built, the TW stamp at 70%, and then when it's done, I want it to show it to me. So now I could click export and it'll do it, but just for kicks, we're going to go ahead and add it as a preset called for web. That way we won't have to ever recreate this. We'll just click on for web next time and it will be set and ready to go because that name's already taken. So we can't use for web. Let's use for web Lightroom 5. There we go. So now that we've done that, we'll go ahead and click export. And there it is. It made a JPEG of that file with the exact same name. And if I preview it real quick, it shows my little watermark in the lower left-hand corner as it should. And this is a photo that's only 143K that I could give someone or put online or do whatever I wanted to do with it. So that is how to export your images for sharing. Now there's one more thing. Lightroom does have the ability to email a photo now. So you can email a photo directly out of Lightroom. You could use a preset. There are some presets already built in here. So I could say use full size, for example, or 800 pixels long, or you can make your own preset. You can tell it where to go, what subject, and what email program to use, or however you configure Lightroom to send your emails. It will attach it and then launch my email program and let me go ahead and address it if I want to, or add more to the body or whatever I want. And yes, you can select more than one image. So you can email 10 images at a time, 20 at a time, whatever it takes. Then I'd hit send, it would launch my email program, and I would finish the email off and send it. So that is exporting and sending your photos. Number 9, printing. So let's say that I want to print this photo, and this photo. So I've just held down my command key or control key on Windows and selected 3 discontiguous or non-contiguous photos. So now I'll hit print and I can say use the selected photos, and these are the 3 that would print as I selected them. And now you get to do the great thing on Lightroom, which is decide how it's going to print. You can do single image, you can do picture package, you can do custom package. You can decide anything about it. The margin, it will auto scale, auto size, do whatever you want based on any of the settings that you do here. So if you want to print in multiple rows, multiple columns, you can do all of these cool things. Now, once you have your print settings set up, you can save those as templates. And I've got a few here just so you can kind of see what some of the things I've done. So 3 square large, 3 up tall. And yes, you can move them around inside the little frames here. So all kinds of cool things that you could do with your photos. So if you want an 8x10 gallery print, 7x5, 10x8, 11x14, these are all settings that I set up once and saved as a preset, just like we did for the exporting. All right, so once you're done setting this up the way you want, I kind of like the 3 tall, but I wouldn't use the Adobe one. I would use my other one. So identity plates are identity plates. You can make your own. We can do an edit here, and we can use a graphic one, and we can locate that same file. There we go. And we can scale that down and put the logo there. There we go. can make that much smaller though. All right, but once you've got it all set up, you can either print to your printer. If you're a printer kind of person, you got a printer connected to your computer, you can print it directly to your printer. Or if you're going to send it to a lab, which is what I do to have things printed, then you can say, do all of this, but do it to a JPEG file. And then it will basically let you print to file, save the JPEG out, then you can upload it to your lab and have it professionally printed on whatever you want it printed on. And again, you can go and create your own paper sizes and all that using your printer setup just like you normally would. So that is how to print from Lightroom, whether you're printing directly to your own printer or exporting and printing to a lab. Last but not least, and this is the biggest one that I get now all the time, and this is the one where people get messed up the most too. So we're going to spend a couple minutes on this. And that is, how do I move my photos? In other words, I'm done with the Amanda folder. I don't need the Amanda folder on my laptop hard drive anymore. I want to put it on an external. How do I do that? All right, so I have an external hard drive right here. I'm going to plug in that drive. It's a USB 3 drive here. And somewhere I've got a USB 3 cable waiting for me. And we're just going to plug the drive in. And that drive is going to spin up, and Lightroom's not going to do a darn thing about it, because Lightroom only cares about hard drives that you've used in Lightroom. So just adding a drive to your computer or turning a drive on or plugging a drive in, Lightroom has no interest in it until you tell it to have some interest in it. And the way we're going to tell it is you have to use the drive at least once in Lightroom. Then from that point on, moving things is easy. So we have to set it up one time, and here's how we do it. We're going to add a folder to that drive. We're going to add a pictures folder to it. Now, it could already have one, and then you could just choose it. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and tell it to create one. So I'm just going to go ahead and say create a new folder, add a folder, and it's going to say where. It brings up the normal operating system thing. Hey, I've got a hard drive called Stuff. It's an external USB drive. Create a new folder on that hard drive called Pictures. Create. Choose. Done. So now there is a Pictures folder on a Stuff hard drive that Lightroom now knows about. That's all you had to do. Once you tell Lightroom there's a folder and it knows to keep track of that folder, from that point on, you can move anything you want from one hard drive to the other in Lightroom. So I'm going to say, take the Amanda folder that we're done with and move it to the Pictures folder just by dragging it. It's going to say, hey, you're moving this. Are you sure you want to do this? Or, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I am. Don't show me that again. And now it's basically one by one. You're going to see them disappear from the Amanda folder here. And that video is taking a moment to copy. But once it's done, you're going to see them disappear from here, and they will now be on the Stuff hard drive. So that's how that works. It basically does all the movement and tracking for you. Where people get messed up is they go outside Lightroom and start moving stuff around. And it's better if you let Lightroom do it, because it now knows where everything is. Now, if you've screwed up and you've done it on your own and things are disconnected, you can fix it. So for example, I'm going to do it the hard way. I'm going to quit. And I'm going to go take the Seattle folder, which is on my desktop. There we are. I'm going to take the Seattle folder and I'm going to move it to the Stuff hard drive now, manually. So I'm doing it outside of Lightroom. Lightroom doesn't know anything about what I'm doing right now. And so I just moved that Stuff folder using the operating system, or moved the Seattle folder to the Stuff drive in the Pictures folder using the operating system. Now when I launch Lightroom again, Lightroom is going to say, or it's not going to say anything, but when I go look at that folder, it's going to say, I don't know where these images are anymore. And there it is, question mark. It doesn't know where these 5 images are anymore because I did something outside of Lightroom. Lightroom didn't know anything about it. So how do I now tell it where these are? Well, first of all, I'd still be able to work on these. I'd still be able to go in the develop module and I'd still be able to do anything I wanted to do because I built a smart preview. So if I wanted to crank up the saturation in this photo, if I wanted to crank up the vibrance, a little too much saturation. If I wanted to change the exposure, notice it's letting me do all these things, even though the photo is technically missing because it has a smart preview. Now, if I really want to reconnect it to the high-res version, so I can do everything like export it, open it in Photoshop, all of that, then I really need to reconnect it, and I do that by clicking any one of these on this little icon in the upper right-hand corner. That icon will either be the smart preview icon or it will be an exclamation point, depending on if it doesn't have a smart preview or not. And once I tell it to locate this photo, because it says, hey, it's not here anymore, it's not where you told me it was, you got to show me where it is now. So we're going to go here in the Seattle folder and locate 7981, and there it is. And then it fixed all the rest. So now in the pictures folder, it now knows about the Seattle images. It left this orphan Seattle folder that used to be there that now has 0 images in it. I can right click on it and remove it because that folder is now in the stuff hard drive. So I hope you learned something about Lightroom. I hope you learned how to get started. And that last thing, believe it or not, is where people trip up the most because your photos are a work in progress. You're always shooting, working, and then archiving or moving off to a bigger storage area. So that last part was actually one of the most important things of these top 10 because that's the thing where people they do it the wrong way outside of Lightroom and then they have to worry about trying to fix it versus just moving things around in Lightroom and letting Lightroom fix itself because it knows what it's doing. So that's it for this How to Get Started with Lightroom 5. My name is Terry White. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.